I'm really, really on a tear to get more indie filmmakers running listings for their projects with Taxi because every time we do that, I, literally every single time we've run listings for indie filmmakers working on films, the majority of the music in the film ends up coming from Taxi members. And while it doesn't
Yeah,
pay a fortune, people love getting that credit. And, I mean, usually they pay somewhere between $100 and $500 a track or a song to license the stuff, but it's a nice credit to have.
absolutely.
And the
Yeah,
filmmakers love it because they're normally going to royalty-free music sites that frankly oftentimes don't have great music. And when I've asked indie filmmakers, why do you go to royalty-free libraries? It's because they are under the misguided impression that if it's not royalty free, that they're the ones that are going to have to write the quarterly check for the performance royalties. They don't understand how performing rights organizations like ASCAP, BMI, and CSAC in the
yeah.
U.S. pay that money, and that's why they go to royalty free sites. So I think that a lot of educating there's a lot of educating that could be done with indie filmmakers to help them understand how they can get better music for the same amount of money. It's
That's
crazy.
right. That's very correct on all levels there. And I deal with filmmakers all the time. I did a web series and and a film in the last couple of years that had the same royalty. Well, it was like one of these guys that does free music for films. They just want the credit, whatever. They had the same track in two different things. Wasn't that great of a track, but that's how ridiculous it gets. And one of them was like a main theme for the series. Thinking, man, what a waste! You could have had somebody write something original for that. I love that idea if Taxi got more involved, and I'd be happy to help with resources I have on that too, because I think there are a lot of people out there. I think we're very tribal. I've realized as filmmakers and musicians. And one thing, by learning how to be a filmmaker, I'm breaking out into another tribe. There was a friend of mine, a great composer in the Seattle area, Eric Getz, who I ran into at a happy hour of filmmakers and musicians that were happening before we all had to separate. And what was intriguing about it is I had actually recommended to the Office of Film and Music of Seattle that we should have name badges, and we might want to have filmmaker ones and composer ones. And that
Great
way we could
idea.
know our tribes. We could go to the happy hour and say, "Oh, I want to meet the filmmaker." Well, the irony is Eric made this. I saw him, and he was wearing a filmmaker one versus a musician one. And I thought,
Why?
Eric, why are you wearing a filmmaker when you're a composer? He goes, well, I'm actually on the film side. That's the way I treat myself. And it was brilliant because I realized the filmmakers tend to talk to filmmakers, and the musicians tend to talk to musicians when you're at an event like that. And
Right.
so, my recommendation is learn how to be a filmmaker, understand that group, and break into those things, and find filmmaker groups rather than musicians groups. If you want to talk about something more than music, you want to talk about film, man. And if you want to meet with music supervisors, find music supervisor groups,
Right.
stuff like that. So it's all about kind of seeking out other tribes and making peace arrangements with them.
You
But
know,
as far as licensing goes, uh, yeah, you can license one song. You can license the entire score. And one of the great problems is ignorance. That this can work in a lot of
yeah.
ways. A filmmaker may approach me and say, "Well, can you write this score?" And then they're going to assume that they're going to own the music forever. Well, that would
Right.
be great if my name was John Williams at $1 million budget for music. Sure, you can own my music for that amount of money, but if you're going to pay me a couple $100 or 500 or $1,000 for a score or something like that for a short, I'm sorry, I'm not necessarily going to give you rights to that score. But the reality is, if I license it non-exclusively with a filmmaker, just like a piece, and I basically, one trick about contracts is they're not copyrightable. So you can raid every contract on the planet and simply change the wordage on it and fit it to yourself. So over the years, I've picked up many contracts and created my own custom contracts for non-exclusive license of score. And that allows the filmmaker to use the score perpetually. It's going to be part of the project. You're not going to have to pull it out later. And yet I can still possibly use my music in other things as well. Now, the reality of that.
Do they give you any sort of like, you can't license this for another indie film for 2 years or any restrictions like that?
Well, that's something you can negotiate if you really feel that's an issue. Most of the time they don't, because they're delighted to get an original score at a reasonable price.